Keone, do you like mangoes?
I love mangoes.
I love mangoes too, especially local mangoes.
Me too. Oh, you know what? You want to hear some really cool story about mangoes? So my auntie, right? She she planted 2 mango trees in her yard. Like one was a Piri mango and one was a Hayden mango, and they were like far apart, but they got really big, and eventually they grew together.
This is a joke?
No, this is serious. This is
Okay.
legit, for real. So they grew together, and on the right side of the tree, you could get Piri mangoes, and on the left side of the tree, you could get Hayden mangoes, and in the middle of the tree, the mangoes were Piri Hayden mangoes. Isn't that pretty cool?
You're making that
No,
up.
that's for real.
Where is
and I
that?
actually have one
Where?
here right now. No, this is in Mo'ili.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Awesome mangoes. The blend is really good. But no, that's for real. Anyway, since we were talking about mangoes, and you love mangoes, I thought we should make mango bread.
Ooh. But not just any mango bread. It's
No, because we can't just do one. We gotta kick it up. We're gonna do mango macnut bread.
All right.
So I'm actually gonna finish dicing these mangoes. Why don't you go ahead and start dealing with your dry ingredients there?
Okay, so I'm going to put together the dry ingredients. So the flour,
Uh-huh.
baking powder, baking soda, and the cinnamon. And I'll just sift it.
Yep. You know, an interesting thing about baking powder and baking soda is when you're working with those 2 products in the recipe, if you see baking powder, then you don't really have to worry. But if you're working with baking soda, you need to make sure that the recipe has an acid in there, okay?
Where's our acid?
In this case, we're going to be adding lemon juice as part of the recipe, and that's the acid.
And why is that?
Well, what happens is baking soda by itself will not give you the chemical leavening that you need. You need to have an acid to counteract with it. It's kind of like, have you ever cleaned your battery terminals with baking soda before?
No.
Well, so you put baking soda and then you pour like vinegar on it, and that's acid, and it makes it foam up. The act of that foaming is what is the leavening that happens into the bread that you're making. Now, the reason you don't have to worry if you're dealing with baking powder is because baking powder is baking soda or sodium bicarbonate with the addition of tartaric acid or cream of tartar. So it's got the acid and the baking soda mixed together already. So that's why when you're doing a recipe, you don't have to. This recipe that we wrote, I have both, but I did make sure there was acid to work with. Does that make sense?
How do you know all this?
Well, I have a PhD in food science. No, I don't. I bought one on the internet. But anyway, so this is the mango. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the wet ingredients now. So I have oil in here. And the next thing I want to do is put some eggs in here. And you can do that for me. Can you crack these 3 eggs into the oil here?
Can I crack it in another bowl before
Sure.
I put it in there?
No, you're good. I trust
Oh, okay.
you.
I'll just crack it in here, and then I put it in there.
And why would you do that?
Because in case I get the shell in there.
You know, if you watch another recipe, that's where I taught her that, and she learned it. Awesome. I think, right? Okay, that's one. Go ahead. So I have vanilla, that's going to go in. And then I have the lemon juice that's going to go in. Egg number 2, that's going to go in.
And this is
You can
number
put your rubbish in here.
3.
Your rubbish. So I'm going to whisk this. In Hawaii, we say rubbish. Right? Okay, now that this is whisked, can you also go ahead and pour in? I have milk right here, and then I have 2 sugars that are going to go in. So milk goes in.
2 sugars. Oh.
Yeah, I have,
White sugar
there's some
and then brown
recipes that only have white sugar. I added some brown sugar because I like that sort of that caramelized molasses flavor that it's going to add, but I don't want too much, so I added some white and some brown. If you add too much, it just becomes overpowering. Perfect. So I added the sugar because I wanted it to sort of start to dissolve in here, so it's not.
Oh, instead of adding it with the dry.
Right. So you could. That's some recipes you see like that, but I like it this way. Now you're gonna help me. What I'm gonna do is we're gonna pour the wet into the dry. Okay. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this up a little bit so the flour nicely incorporates. And I'm going to make a little well. See the well? Pour that in the center. A little
Whoops.
sugar. Now here's the thing. You're putting the wet into the dry because that's what it's going to fold in easier. If I poured the dry into the wet, all the dry would just float on top and it'd be a hard, clumpy mess, hard to mix.
So you do the well.
Right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in.
Instead of stirring it.
Right. And what's the reason we would do that?
Because the protein from the flour would come out and make it tough?
Pretty much. I mean, what happens is if you overwork this, and that's what people tend to do when they're working with flour and cakes and batters, is they're afraid of lumps and they're not sure when they should stop, and they think that they need to have it really, really smooth. And sometimes you do need to have it smooth. But in this case, we're making a quick bread, so a few lumps is actually okay. But what I'm doing here now is I'm working this in. It's okay to have a few lumps. I don't want to keep heavily working this because you were absolutely right. The flour has protein in it as it's developed when it's mixed with, when it hits liquid. And if I overwork this, it will become tough. All that protein gets really tough and it will not be fun to eat. So that's what we look like now. It's a few lumps, but it's overall
it's
very
okay.
smooth, right?
All
So
right.
let's throw the nuts in there. And we'll throw
The mangoes
mangoes.
from your auntie's yard.
This is a puree Hayden mango. I'm gonna put some ginger. Why don't you do the honors on the pans there?
Okay.
And I'm putting this in last because all this solid material, if I tried to mix it with when I was trying to incorporate it, it would just kind of get in the way and just make it, it would just kind of overweigh this thing down. Don't be afraid to spray that. You really want to make sure you get into the bottom, the edges, and the sides so it doesn't stick. That's good. Perfect. That's cool. Okay, now we're gonna pour, here you can help me. Oh, hold the bowl. Perfect. I'm gonna pour half into one.
You have to make sure the mangoes are ripe.
The riper, the better. I mean, it's a tricky balance because if they're too ripe, sometimes they're mushy, right? So I like to try to find rather ripe mangoes, but not super overly ripe. The kind that's almost like just mush, right?
So you want to use mangoes that you would eat? Like
Yeah, but maybe just
ready to eat?
you can use ready to eat mangoes or mangoes that are just past the, maybe they're sort of a little bit past the stage where they're gonna have a nice texture to eat.
Okay.
A little bit too soft.
But not overripe.
Right. Well, I mean, it depends. Some people like mangoes with really, really strong mango flavor, and if you like them like that, then.
But
go
it can't
for
be
the red.
mushy.
I tend not to like them super mushy. If you like them mushy, then have at it. You know what I mean? It's really a preference thing, is what I'm trying to say. So now we're gonna put these on a tray. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna bake them in the oven at 400 degrees for 20 minutes, and then I'm gonna drop to 350 degrees for probably another 30 minutes. The thing we're looking for is that the toothpick will come out clean, and it will have a nice rise, and it should have a crack down the center. You want it to crack down the center. That's a characteristic of a properly made quick bread. All right, so
Do we cover it?
no, we don't cover it. But in the event that in the event that yours starts to get too dark on the top, you can't put
Then
a
you
piece
cover.
of foil on top.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. We'll be back. So we've baked our mango McNut bread, and it was again 50 minutes, 20 minutes at 400, 30 minutes at 350 till the toothpick came out clean. We let them cool so they can set. You don't want to cut into what's hot because it's still baking, and they've cooled down now. They're still nice and warm, and it's time to eat. I'm gonna cut a few pieces here.
It smells really good.
You want some butter with yours?
Oh yes, it's better.
Puree Hayden mango peeking out. A little waft of steam. That's always nice.
Let's eat it.
All right, all right. Here, this one for you.
Mmm.
You can see that, huh?
Yeah.
You can see all the mango pieces in here. It looks great. Little mac nuts floating in there. Little butter here. You don't have to wait for me. I know you don't want to wait. Just go for it.
Oh, it looks so good.
So what do you think?
Mmm.
Good? Is it better than your grandma's?
Just as good.
Nice. So for this recipe for mango mac nut bread and others, visit us at foodland.com.